Hey, good morning, family. Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
What's our first Air Force value?
Integrity.
So I say this to you a lot. Integrity, right? The root of integrity comes from the same word as integer, same word as integrate. Same root as integer, same as integrate, which means wholeness, means completeness. So what you're trying to do as an airman above everything, first and last, is you are trying to be whole. You are trying to be the most genuine, authentic, balanced version of yourself, which makes you the most powerful version of yourself. What? So what I say to you a lot is see the whole picture. The invitation is see the whole picture. What are we celebrating on Monday? For a lot of people, this represents the picture of goodness in the world. Martin Luther King is a person that spread joy, justice, light. It was all about bringing the whole picture of humanity together. It was all about joining us as races, as sexes, as genders, as whatever, together as one human family. Whore? A lot of African American households in the country, you're not going to be able to go in and not see a picture of Martin Luther King on the wall, representing something to aspire to. What? So Martin Luther King was all these things, right? He was all these really good, all these really beautiful, light things. Martin Luther King also struggled with mental health for most of his life. Severe depression. Martin Luther King attempted suicide twice before he was 13 years old. Made it through that. This is a part of the shadow that comes with the light. Not doesn't take away from his life, but it's something to consider if you see the whole picture of him. Boy. Martin Luther King had a good friend, good mentor named Bayard Rustin, who organized the March on Washington, walked with him, taught him, helped develop him. Bayard Rustin was LGBTQ+, which at the time was not very acceptable for a lot of people, certainly not in the black community and not in the civil rights movement. And so Martin Luther King, while he said all these things about everybody being together and injustice here is an injustice everywhere, we need to be whole, we need to be this, we need to be that, he struggled with this because he loved Bayard Rustin, but he had a hard time wrapping his head around that aspect of Bayard Rustin. So ultimately Bayard Rustin had to step into the sidelight so that he didn't give Martin Luther King that whole thing that he was wrestling with, but that's part of his light. That's a part of his shadow. Does that make sense? Martin Luther King was married to Coretta Scott King, love of his life. But Martin Luther King struggled to be faithful to her. This is well documented. Martin Luther King had many mistresses, lots of little out there stuff. This was a hard thing for him. Doesn't take away from the greatness he did in the world. Doesn't take away from the fact that he transformed everybody and everything for generations and centuries. But this is good to know so you see the whole picture of him. Does this make sense? Know this. 4 things. 1, every light has shadow. The person in your life who you think is amazingly good, has no vice, does nothing but walk on water and good stuff in a world that is inaccurate. Does that make sense? Martin Luther King said it this way. He said there's good in the worst of us and evil in the best of us. I tend not to think about people as good and evil. I think about people as light and shadow. The person that you think is the darkest, I think is the person that is the most fearful, is in the most pain, is the most confused, is the person that was the most abused. Doesn't justify what they're doing or how they're doing it, but you got to see the whole picture. Every light has a shadow. Person in your class you're looking at, that you're like, if I could just be like them, they are struggling with something that would shock you. I'm a chaplain, I can tell you. Every person you're looking out here is wrestling with something heavy that would shock you. You would never guess that. All you see is their light. Some of the issue with social media is all people post usually is their light. So you get the impression that everything in their life is light. That's not true. It's not the whole picture. Everybody standing on this path has a shadow. At least one, probably 2. Now this is not an evil thing about you necessarily, but it's a challenge, it's a struggle. It's important that you see that whole picture. Doesn't take away from your light, but every light has a shadow, huh? The reverse of that too means every shadow has a light. So the person in your life who you think is completely dark, who does no good on the world, doesn't add anything to the existence, it's just a waste of breath or a waste of humanity, has some light in there. Does that make sense? This is hard when that person has done you harm. When that person has been absent from your life or toxic in your life, you're going to be tempted to say this person is all dark. But that's inaccurate. I can always find 2 or 3 people. You could always find 2 or 3 people who would say, that person was good to me. They took care of me. As far as I can tell, that person is really good. Sometimes you see this in the same family, right? Some of you have siblings who are a large distance of years away from you. Sometimes you see your parents doing different stuff with them. They get more light. You feel like you got all the shadows. Some of you are the oldest, and your parents figured some stuff out with you. By the time they got around to your younger sibling, they seem to be more gentle, more peaceful. They seem to have figured out some wisdom stuff, and you think, now they seem to be all light. Before they were all shadow. None of those things are accurate. Does that make sense? Whatever person you were looking at in your class, in your dorm, in this whatever that you think is completely dark, has no light in there, not true. So the third thing is, see the whole picture. The person that you think is all the way good has nothing happened, struggling with something. So ask them. Be curious. There's always more than meets the eye. Nobody is picture perfect. Ask them. The person who you think is completely dark and full of hate and whatever is afraid. They're full of pain. Probably pain they want other people to share with them, and it comes out as really dark looking stuff. Be curious about them, and you would see some of the light that is in there buried under that stuff. Does that make sense? Seeing the whole picture is important so that you don't judge people. So that when you see people here have their challenges or their struggles, you don't judge them. You try to integrate with them. You try to bring them together, because what you want is a whole family in here. And it would be easy for you to look at somebody and be like, how could you do that? All you need to do is remember your life. Remember the thing that you struggle with. Everybody comes into my office, there's some stuff that's crazy. I'd be like, oh, except I have to remember that there are 3 or 4 or 5 things that I struggle with. And if you could see the whole picture of me, it wouldn't take away from my light, but it would let you know that I'm a whole human being. Does this make sense? So the third thing is see the whole picture. Last thing is be. Be the whole picture. Lean into the part of you that is shadow and a part of you that is light. Both of those things are important. They both help. Martin Luther King struggled with severe depression, which means that he knew what it was to have that nightmare all the time. The I have a dream speech comes out of that. It's not in spite of that. He's moving through depression, so he gets that being black at that point in America feels like depression. So he knows how to speak to it because that's his thing. It makes him a particular kind of instrument, particular kind of vessel. But you can't separate that depression from him. Him being in those depths allows him to lead other people through those depths. Me having suffered with anxiety for a large part of my life helps me sit with other people who have anxiety, and I cannot separate that. The thing that got me to meditation is anxiety. I can't separate that. Now, what a lot of people reflect to me is, oh, Chap, you're so soothing. You're so calm. You're so balanced. And I am now. But only because I moved through that. And the whole picture of me includes that part of my life. Does that make sense? Some of the stuff you're going through here is purely for your emotional benefit, so that later you can lead other people through it, so that you are a more relatable leader later, so that your people will not feel weird bringing something to you because you have felt it. And you can relate to them and they can relate to you. Does this make sense? Shadows are important because that is what makes your life meaningful. When I was a bass player for a living, I could play with people sometimes who were technically brilliant, but could not really come from a gut place, emotional place, and really deliver something. Some songs you have to have felt for you to really sing it. You have to have been betrayed. You have to have been lied to. You have to have been cheated on. You have to have been stepped on. You have to have any number of things that happen for your joy, for you to really sing something and it come through. And when you get there, it makes you a much more effective artist people like are touched by you because you're touched by the song. You can relate to it. Does this make sense? In order for you to be able to relate to it, you need to have had shadow. You need to be in touch with your shadow side. Because that's what brings all the flavor to life. That brings all the texture to life. Don't beat yourself up for whatever shadow you perceive that you have, because everybody has one. Always try to work to get better. We're always trying to work toward integrity, always trying to work toward wholeness. But the more you know what you're struggling with, the less judgmental you are of what the person to your left or your right is struggling with. And the more we become a whole family. When you think about this day, Martin Luther King, think about all the amazing, beautiful, impactful, medicinal things that he did in the world, but also know that he struggled with some stuff. And all that was important. Does that make sense? Him struggling with infidelity was important because he could look across the line at people who were trying to burn him or put fire hoses on him or dogs on him and know, oh, that's their shadow, but I also have mine. Does that make sense? Even though I'm opposed to you, I'm standing opposed to you, I know we're both human beings at the end of the day. If I'm loving you, that's the only way we're going to get back together. It is a 3-day weekend. Enjoy it. Not too much, Commander said it. You got to see the whole picture. When you're out and about, decompress, celebrate. You're in the American Air Force. You're an airman. You're doing something that 99.9% of people couldn't do. So turn up respectively. Don't drink anything you're not supposed to drink. Don't dishonor your ancestors. Don't dishonor your kids. Don't dishonor your loved ones, and get out of here what you came in here to get. Does that make sense? Every Friday, like we do, I'll say these words. James Brufton, you lead it, I'll follow. I'll lead it, you'll follow. This is it. I am it. You are it. So is that. He is it. She is it. And it is it. And that is that. Oh, it is this. It is thus. It is them. It is us. It is now. Here it is. Here we are. This is it. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, sir.